what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, December 8th, 2016. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is sitting in our control room as usual, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. A lot of stuff going on right now. The whole planet seems to be rocking and rolling today. They've had a magnitude 7.7 quake down in the Solomon Islands, and I'm sure it's wreaked havoc with those people. We briefly had a tsunami watch here in Hawaii. That has now been canceled, as well as for the Pacific Rim, and I'm sure the Clinton Foundation is already heading for Solomon to take care of them the way they did those poor people down in Haiti. But there are a lot of quakes going on. Earlier today, we had a 6.5 off the coast of Northern California. They just had another one, not too big, 5.2 down in Chile. But it does make it look like the whole Pacific tectonic plate is kind of ringing with all of this seismic activity. So we're going to be keeping an eye out for more of this stuff going on here. Alrighty, now then. Former astronaut John Glenn has passed away. He was the last surviving Mercury astronaut. He was 95 years old, so I don't think anybody's going to say that he tragically died young. And, of course, he was very famous for being the first American to orbit the Earth. And I think it's a little unfair. Most people don't understand. There was one other American who went into space before John Glenn, and that, of course, was Alan Shepard in his suborbital flight. And then, of course, John Glenn had a very long career in the U.S. Senate, which was marred by the Keating 5 scandal. And so he has now passed away. The heroes of our childhood are fading into memory here. Today is the anniversary of the assassination of John Lennon. And if you're my age, of course, you will remember he was very famous for his band, the Beatles. But the official story, of course, crazed lone nut with a gun. But Lennon's son is convinced that John Lennon was the victim of a government assassination, and it's not entirely unreasonable because the establishment of Lennon's day were almost as afraid of Lennon as our current establishment is of Donald Trump. Lennon's popularity had spread beyond his music into his philosophy, and he'd written this song, Imagine, which was a hit all over the world, and it terrified the establishment because it postulated a world free from religious domination, the need for governments, the need for conspicuous consumption. So the entire status quo was very upset over his ability to convince the younger generation not to play along with all the little things that make the elites rich and allow them to be sent off to war. So he was a major threat to the status quo with his philosophy and his popularity. Now then, getting on to the recount circus, and it really is, the Michigan recount is now officially over. A judge has ordered the suspension of the recount. There had been several different legal challenges going on back and forth, and ultimately it came down to two things. One, having gotten so few votes herself, Jill Stein was deemed not to be aggrieved and not to have standing to order a recount at Michigan taxpayer expense, and the allegations of hacking by the Russians, there was no evidence of that. The other problem is, and you're not going to see this reported on the corporate TV national news, Michigan found so many problems with the ballots and ballot boxes that basically carrying out a recount was impossible. And they were finding all these ballot boxes that still had the official seals on them, and they had the wrong number of ballots in them. Some had way too many ballots. Some had way too few. In one extreme case, all the paperwork said this box should have 306 ballots, and it only had about 50 in there. Now, Michigan law says that if there is a discrepancy, that precinct cannot be recounted. on the presumption that the discrepancy is evidence of trying to stuff the ballot box ahead of a recovery, which appears to have been going on in several places. So basically that was the other reason that they cut that down. And interesting story coming out of Breitbart pointing out that Michigan has now spent more on Jill Stein's recount than it would have cost to provide a clean water system for the city of Flint, Michigan. But no, it's Jill Stein has to have her recount. Well, they've cut it off, and they're going to let that go. So basically, there were a total of 5 states involved in this recount mess. Michigan, the recount is now stopped. Their electors are still for Trump. They're still going to the Electoral College. Wisconsin's recount has not significantly changed anything at all, and they are going to finish by the deadline so that they can proceed to the Electoral College. Over in Pennsylvania, there are some discrepancies, but not enough to trigger a statewide recount. And there's a hearing in court tomorrow. The plug may be pulled on that one as well. Now, there was another recount request out in Nevada, started by another third-party candidate. Now, Nevada is a state that Hillary won, and this candidate asked for a recount to try and offset Jill Stein only wanting recounts only in states that Donald Trump won. And so far, that recount hasn't come up with anything dramatic either, and will probably stop with the existing precincts being counted. Then there is finally that lawsuit by 3 voters down in Florida who are insisting Hillary Clinton won Florida because the Russians were hacking the election systems down there, blah, 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 blah. Now, over in Philadelphia, as the recount numbers do not work toward any success for Hillary, Jill Stein and her Green Party filed a lawsuit to inspect the election software in those electronic voting machines, which you could go over to Black Box Voting and get it here. But the election board rejected the idea. The judge agreed on that one. Part of the problem being that these private companies that set up these electronic voting machines have declared the software in them to be protected intellectual property, trade secrets, as if there's some big mystery about a piece of software that says, if this dot is penciled in, add 1 to this register tally over here. But that's the way the law is set on up. And even if you're looking at the source code for the software for the electronic voting machine, that doesn't guarantee that the executable actually in that electronic voting machine came from that source code. That's one of the weak areas of security. And again, getting on back out to Las Vegas, where so many of their gambling machines are now computerized as well, you would just be stunned at all the security and government oversight and how the software has to be escrowed and everything inspected. And why can't our electronic voting machines be under the same kind of scrutiny as the gambling machines out in Las Vegas? I mean, doesn't it seem absurd they're going to be that careful with the gambling machines and so cavalier with our electronic voting machines? We're going to do a shout-out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Steve in California. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Steve, are you there? There you are.
Yeah, I'm here. I have to agree with you that the possibility that John Lennon was assassinated, taken out by government. But there was also something a while back I read that 20,000 pages the government had on John Lennon, especially when he came out against the Vietnam War, and he proved to have quite a following, being a peacemonger, a peacekeeper, and wanting to stop the war. Of course, they don't like that. But they had 20,000 documents on him trying to find reason to actually deport him out of the country at the time.
Yeah, they did. And if you go to my COINTELPRO page, there's actually a mention of that, about all this spying on Hollywood and the entertainers.
Last thing I got to say, I sent you an email, so check that out, on the Lord Christopher Monckton. I'm still trying to work on setting that interview up for you. He is an amazing man, and you're going to have a good interview if you have him on your show. So be looking for that information maybe later on this evening.
I look forward to it, and thank you very much for hooking us together, because it's great to have somebody who's out there who's not in the employ of Al Gore or the United Nations, pointing out how ridiculous all this stuff is. And we're going to be talking about ClimateGate in our third hour because, as probably most of you already know, and I'm getting emails from listeners all across the U.S. saying, oh, my goodness, is it cold?
Yeah.
All righty?
Hey, thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, there is a progressive liberal public relations firm was founded by environmentalist and CNN political contributor Van Jones. They are working for these GOP electors who've come on out and say they're going to vote against Donald Trump. And apparently with the recounts failing, we're now seeing this push to just convince the Electoral College to do what's the right thing for the good of the country, probably for their wallets. And I mean, this is utterly ridiculous. And again, many states have laws compelling the electors to go with the vote in their state. Again, Donald Trump won the election by the rules everybody agreed to play by going into this campaign season. And now that it's over, and Hillary and the liberals did not get the result they want, they're out there demanding the rules be changed. These little snowflakes and buttercups are out there saying, we will cry if you don't change the rules so we can win and get a participation trophy so we don't have to go into our safe rooms and play with the Play-Doh. But as a final reminder, first of all, if the Electoral College betrays America, that could trigger a civil war. I mean, I'm hearing this from so many different people saying that if Trump is kicked out of the White House and Hillary put on in, there's going to be violence in the streets. I'd like to avoid that. It's a bad thing. It's rough on the landscaping. It discourages tourism, and we'd like to avoid that here. But remember, under the Constitution, Congress has the right to overrule the Electoral College if just one senator and one representative conclude the Electoral College has not acted in good faith. And with all the stories about death threats to the Trump electors, the posting of their home contact information and phone numbers by Democrats in their states, nobody could make the case that the Electoral College did act in good faith in performance of their duty. So this thing is going to go completely crazy, and they haven't given up. Remember, during the primaries and during the run-up to the general election, we were hearing how teachers in the schools were brainwashing their students that if Donald Trump was elected, the world was going to come to an end, their families would be torn apart, they'd be fed to lions or whatever else that was going to go on, which is why now that Donald Trump has actually won, all these kids who believed this nonsense from their teachers, they're freaking out and they're having to put them on prescription antidepressants and all the rest of that. Well, I got an email from somebody who listens to our show saying that, the goal of all of this during the election was brainwash the kids to be for Hillary and against Trump and hope the kids would then in turn sort of infect their parents at home with the same ideology. That was the thinking behind all of this. So I get this letter from a listener who says right now her third grader came on home and their class was discussing why it would be a good thing for the Electoral College to kick Donald Trump out and put Hillary in the hope that the kids will then go home and tell their parents, oh, this would be a good thing if Donald Trump was kicked out of the White House and Hillary was put on in. And in the middle of all of this, I'd like to ask a question of our educational system. In between all this liberal indoctrination and Hillary good, Donald Trump bad, global warming is real, safe spaces, what restroom do you use? Do you have any time left over to actually teach these kids useful skills like reading, writing, and mathematics? Because it doesn't seem like it. It seems like our public school system has become a full-time indoctrination center. Now, somebody did a video of the protesters who are arrayed in front of Trump Tower about Donald Trump must go, Donald Trump must go. And it was kind of funny to watch because this gentleman from InfoWars is going on down, and he's trying to talk to the protesters, and he's being kept at a distance by the private security. They actually don't want these people talked to by anybody in the media. And so the interviewer is asking him basic question, why are you opposed to Donald Trump? Well, he raped women. Really name one. And they go, He says, are you aware all those charges have been dropped? Oh, no. We know that he raped, he's a terrible. And they're basically reading off, it's very obvious, these are paid people to be there, a rent-a-ruckus. They're out there, they've got a few lines they're supposed to shout over and over and over again, and they don't actually know anything about Trump or Hillary or anything. It's a rent-a-mob for the benefit of the corporate media. Now, as you know, Boeing is very upset with Donald Trump because Donald Trump is thinking of canceling an order for a new super flying palace, a new Air Force One built on the 747-8, the world's longest commercial passenger liner. It's a gargantuan aircraft, much bigger than the current Air Force One. And apparently Obama approved this program, and apparently he thought he was having it built for Hillary. And Hillary was saying, I need a bigger Air Force One because I'm going to be the first woman president of the United States of America. And Boeing stock took a hit on all of this. And so Boeing basically came on out and declared that Donald Trump was a liar, that the new Air Force One wasn't going to cost anywhere near $4 billion, since the cost of two of the actual aircraft is less than $1 billion to start with. But apparently somebody leaked some numbers out of Boeing to show that they're already at $2.7 billion and they haven't actually started building the aircraft yet. So, anyway. Now, as you know, General Mattis is drawing a lot of criticism by the Trump bashers. But the reality is his background, he is a real soldier. He's been in real combat. And he's out there talking about his philosophy and thinking about war. And it's actually a good one. It's very much in line with Eisenhower, who was the last president we had that actually served in a major war. And so Mattis, he's not about glory. He's not about America's greatness. He's very cautious. And like Eisenhower, he saw combat. Like Eisenhower, he understands it's something to be avoided whenever possible. But if there is no other choice, do it efficiently, intelligently, and effectively. And that's probably why he is so much hated right now, because under our current Secretary of Defense and his predecessors, massive overspending at the Pentagon has just spiraled completely out of control. And right now, our military-industrial complex is manufacturing the most expensive weapons on Earth, and they're all very costly junk. And I'm wondering who in their right mind thinks that the U.S. is going to go up against Russia and China in a war with all these weak and easily offended liberal young people who have never touched a gun because guns are bad, and then equip them with weapons that fall apart in the field and are too expensive to repair more than one or two times. We're not in a good position to be talking about war with anybody. Now, yesterday we reported on how Prime Minister John Key of New Zealand abruptly resigned. And there wasn't much of a public explanation given, but I think we may have figured out what it is. There was a big stink where apparently John Key, working through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, donated millions of New Zealand taxpayer dollars to the Clinton Foundation. Apparently, at least 7.7 million, pledges up to 13 million. And that may be why Key has resigned, because pretty much the media everywhere else but the United States has already come to the conclusion the Clinton Foundation is a scam, it's a money laundry, it's a slush fund. And anybody who's donating to it is immediately suspect. And ever since Hillary lost the election, all these foreign donors have just shut off that tap. The money is not pouring in the way it was before, which right there demonstrates it was never about charity, it was about buying influence of the potential president of the United States of America. So, we're coming up here on a commercial break. We're going to stop for a few words, and then we'll be right back with news about the fake news. That's us. Whee! We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get into the fake news, a listener wrote in to remind me that after Alan Shepard's suborbital Mercury flight and before John Glenn's orbital flight, Gus Grissom also did a suborbital flight as well. So, in fact, that may have been the one where he lost the capsule. I'm not sure. But, yeah, I mean, of course, we're talking about 1961, and I am getting old and everything. But, yeah, John Glenn was actually the third American into space. And it's kind of weird how everybody says he's the first one. They even made fun of it in Tom Hanks' From the Earth to the Moon miniseries on HBO, which, by the way, I loved. Bought the DVD set for the thing. And they were doing an episode on Alan Shepard, who, after his one very brief suborbital flight, came down with an ear problem that took him off flight status. And he stayed with the program, stayed with the astronaut management, and eventually surgery was developed to cure his ear problem, and he got to take one of the last Apollo flights to the moon. And they have this scene where Alan Shepard is on the table in the operating room, and the doctor is telling the nurse, that isn't that guy's real name. This is America's first man in space. And the nurse looks at him and says, oh, I'd know John Glenn if I saw him. So, anyway, those were the days. Now let's talk about the real news versus the fake news. The Washington Post has now commented, updated their Russian propaganda story and kind of, sort of, maybe thinks it could possibly have been fake. And that's as close as we're going to get to the Washington Post retracting the story, let alone apologize. And I went back over to that propernaut.com. They've updated their report trying to justify the list. And as it turns out, the list of websites denounced as Russian propaganda agents was built simply from anybody who linked to Russia Today. That's it. That's it. We link to stories in Russia Today. We must be Russian stooges. I link to stories in the New York Times. Doesn't make me an American agent. I link to stories from the BBC all the time. Doesn't make me James Bond 007, licensed to link. That's it. That's the entire basis of the story. Well, the Pope has now weighed on in with this media and has basically said spreading fake news and smearing politicians is now a sin. It's a sin. Spreading disinformation is the greatest damage the media can do. So, the corporate media are not only going to be going bankrupt, they're all going to the dark regions where the devils will poke them with pitchforks, or at least make them spell check all their old articles. Now then, in the meantime, of course, over in the real news, the corporate media, the New York Times and the Washington Post are still pushing the fake news to justify U.S. wars of aggression in other countries. And you go back, and obviously the classic example nobody can argue about, the claim that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, which led to that invasion of Iraq and thousands of people being killed and crippled and tortured to death in some cases. And they're still not apologizing for that one. Saddam hid his weapons of mass destruction. That's why we couldn't find them. He sent them to Syria. He sent them to Monaco. He sent them down to Australia. I mean, just constantly, the corporate media is like the government. If at first you don't succeed, lie again. And that's what they do. Now, this whole attempt to demonize the independent media is getting into a very dangerous area. As you know, there was this obviously contrived shooting incident at the pizza parlor that was at the heart of the Pizzagate hoax, which led to a flood of corporate media articles saying, well, the independent media is fomenting violence. More about this when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm looking on Fox News, and they're still going on about John Glenn. Like there's nothing else happening in the world today, no war in Syria that we're losing, no massive election fraud in Michigan. It's all John Glenn, all the time. And I did go back and confirm that, yes, Gus Grissom's suborbital flight that preceded John Glenn was the one where the capsule was lost, Liberty Bell 7. For those of you living in and around Kansas, the Liberty Bell 7 was recovered from the floor of the ocean and has been restored and is, I believe, on display now at the Kansas City Cosmodrome, or the space museum that they have there. So, anyway, getting on back to the news here. As I mentioned, there is apparently a plan to try and create the image that independent media is leading to violence. And it began with this contrived shooting at this pizza parlor. Didn't get a lot of traction. Now they have another one, and this is where apparently down in Tampa, Florida, there's a 57-year-old woman who basically is out there. She was threatening to kill the parent of a victim in the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre because she's been convinced by those evil independent media that there may have been a hoax regarding that. And this is already starting to look like a pattern. We're probably going to see more of these, where they're going to try and come up with any kind of case where, see, those independent media, they're causing people to become violent, therefore we should shut them down. Well, look at the corporate media's reporting of Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, and how they were saying, there's going to be riots, and how they fanned up the racial tensions in places like Baltimore. The corporate media has caused a lot of violence, including all these wars started with lies. Nobody talks about shutting them down. Now, as you know, there's a new Star Wars movie out called Rogue One, and it's already drawing a lot of criticism. And partly it's because apparently Star Wars Rogue One, the producers and actors behind it, are launching a protest against Donald Trump. And this is coming on top of criticism about how the Rogue One storyline appears to be a very liberal, the multicultural and strong women are going to defeat the white supremacist galactic empire. And people don't go to the movies to be propagandized or lectured to. And we've all had the liberal stuff up to here at this point. It's burned out. And I'm not planning on seeing this movie, even though I'm a huge fan of the original Star Wars. And Claire and I were at a local toy store yesterday getting some last-minute Christmas gifts. And all of the Star Wars Rogue One toys are just piled up right by the entrance. You can't avoid seeing them walking on in. They're all over the place. The new updated version of the Stormtrooper's helmet. It's $99. I mean, come on, guys. Anyway, huge. These monolithic piles of all these toys. Nobody was even stopping. Nobody's buying. It's just, they burned out on this whole thing. Over at Breitbart, they're now under attack. The Washington Post smear notwithstanding, this attempt to demonize independent media as inciting violence in the population, there's an economic war out against the independent media. We've already heard where Google is now shutting off ad revenues for their customers. Same thing with YouTube. They're ending the advertising and sharing of revenues on videos and sites that don't conform with the liberal ideology. And apparently 78 companies have now blacklisted Breitbart News, trying to basically shut them down for daring to stand up and say Donald Trump did win this election by the rules everybody agreed to play with. And screaming about popular vote. And again, we don't really know what Hillary's popular vote was until we subtract out all the non-citizens who voted, at least 3 million, all the duplicate votes they found up in Michigan and Wisconsin, I might add. We don't really know. But that's the talking point. She won the popular vote. She should be the president. The presidential elections are not a popular vote. And remember during that Democratic primary when Bernie Sanders kept winning the popular vote, and somehow Hillary still got the delegates. You didn't see Hillary stand up and say, well, you know, the people obviously prefer Bernie Sanders, so I'm going to give him a couple of my delegates. Did you ever see her do that? No, when it was working in her favor, she was perfectly happy with it. So she's being a hypocrite. And I actually had somebody write in and say, well, you know, we're obviously not going to be doing business, you know, with these companies that are attacking the independent media, and that's a very good thing to do. And also, of course, as ad revenues dry up, citizen support of these independent media outlets becomes more important than ever before. Now, fortunately, Google never allowed me to have ad revenues, and neither did YouTube. So I'm relatively unaffected by the current campaign. I'm very, very happy to see. But as James Corbett is saying, the war is on. The war between the establishment that has built itself with lies, fraud, and deception, and the American people who are standing up and demanding the facts about what's been going on in their country. What has the government really been doing with their money and their children's lives? And there's a real rush going on here because as it looks more and more like Hillary's attempt to derail the Electoral College has fizzled, people are turning to Donald Trump and saying that he will support the independent media. And he probably will, because the corporate media was his enemy from day one. Somebody actually put up this wonderful triptych from Time magazine from back in, I think it was March, and it's a caricature of Trump, and it's starting to melt, and then in October, the same image, but now flat on the ground like a puddle, total meltdown, and then, of course, followed up by the fact that Time had to name Donald Trump Man of the Year. So Trump knows the corporate media was never his friend. They're still adversarial because he read them the Riot Act. And Trump is going directly to the people with his Twitter channel, his YouTube channel, probably the Trump media company that his son-in-law is getting ready to set up. They're going to bypass the old fossil dinosaur corporate media. Donald Trump did an interview with Alex Jones, thanked Alex Jones for his support. The writing is on the wall. If they can't shut down the independent media before January 20th, 2017 will be the year of the independent media. And I'm not the only person who's saying that. Paul Craig Roberts is out with another article saying the tide is turning against the oligarchs. They've had the American people snookered for much of a century now between lying corporate media, private central banking, and now the American people have awakened. And they're not going to go back to sleep anytime soon. Hopefully this is going to be a peaceful, bloodless revolution. But revolution is at hand. And you might as well get used to that idea. Now then, getting on down to the war zones, with Assad on the verge of absolute victory against the U.S. attempt to oust him, the Syrian rebels have requested another ceasefire. We want a pause so we can do whatever we're going to do, which includes the U.S. still trying to extract its spies, CIA spies and special forces and mercenaries that are still inside Aleppo and are going to be hugely embarrassing to the U.S. when Russia or Syria captures them and puts them on world view. But the response from the Syrian government has been very, very curt. It's too late. You should have taken advantage of the offered amnesty program at the time it was offered. And now there's no point in us having a ceasefire. We're on the verge of victory. Now, Assad has come out with a statement, and it's very telling, and it proves that he is very well aware of what the real agenda has been all along. And he's saying the failure of the Western states and Turkey in Aleppo means the entire grand project, the transformation of the Middle East, the capture of all the resource-rich areas and shackling to the dollar, that has failed as well. Because remember, Wesley Clark blew the whistle on this thing back in, I think it was 2005, where the U.S. was going to regime change or conquer all the oil nations of the Middle East and shackle them to the U.S. dollar to maintain the U.S. dollar's hegemonic domination of world trade and banking. And the U.S. is about to lose in Syria, has lost in Syria, our first major defeat since Vietnam. And we never really did get into Iran, did we? So it is starting to come apart. Now, Turkey, perhaps I should call them Wild Turkey, in honor of that particular alcoholic beverage my grandfather used to share with Richard Nixon. Apparently, a Turkish deputy, Binali Yildirim, is out there demanding that 18 Greek islands in the Aegean Sea actually belong to Turkey. And he's now out there saying, I'm going to raise the flag of Turkey on these 18 islands. And that is going to cause yet more consternation. I wish these people would sit down and say, I'm getting tired of this war as much as the ordinary people here. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy has announced that in order to get around the Montrose Convention, limiting how long they can be in the Black Sea, they're now going to start additional Black Sea patrols on a rotating basis. So those ships that have reached the end of the legally allowed time in the Black Sea, as they're sailing out, more U.S. ships are going to sail into the Black Sea. This would be like Russia sailing into the Gulf of Mexico, to understand the importance of this. And all the U.S. or one of their allies needs to do is sneak a small submarine in through the Bosphorus, sink a U.S. ship, blame it on Russia, and we're off and running to the hot war that everybody wants to get going before Trump can take office. We're going to grab a phone call here. Tim in Wyoming, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. We were talking yesterday about, or you were actually, about Android phone security. You said your wife has an Android and you have major problems with it. Now, I wanted to bring up something that most people don't pay much attention to when it comes to Android phones, when it comes to the security of the phones. There are a lot of permissions that the applications will ask for, and a lot of things that they ask for. I mean, I read every single thing that all the permissions that they ask for. When it says that it wants to use your storage, it wants to use your microphone, your camera, your location, your data, whatever it happens to be. And I generally, well, not generally, almost always, probably 90+% of the time, will either send an email to the company and ask them why. I usually get a reply, but I'll ask them why they need these particular things or think that they need these particular things, and then they'll sometimes give me an answer. But in the case that when a phone does things that you don't want it to do, I mean, that's the main thing you have to look at, is the permissions that the application supposedly need. And they say, when it comes to Android, when it comes to the Google Play Store, if you will, they say that sometimes the applications will have other requests for permissions that will be added at a later date. And it doesn't tell you what those will be. It could be anything.
Well, let me step in here for a little bit. First of all, the problems with the Android that Claire is using aren't related to security, because neither of us keeps any kind of confidential information on our smartphones. There's no bank account information. There's no passwords. We're just using them as phones and cameras, basically. I have since found out that one of the problems with Android, at least as it's implemented by Samsung, is that it automatically is constantly preloading apps into memory. So that if you click the icon, they're going to pop up a lot more quickly, and you think the phone is really hip and performing very, very well. The problem is these are applications my wife never uses, and there doesn't seem to be any way to turn off the preload. But beyond that is a larger issue, and I'm giving my age away here. But I was born at a time where you went to a store and you traded your money and you bought something, a phone, a TV, a radio, whatever. You brought it in, you plugged it in, you turned it on, and it did things for you. And for some reason, our younger generation has been brainwashed or acclimated to accept products that require constant tinkering, patching, update, upgrade. We're spending more time working on our appliances than they spend working for us in many cases. One example that really annoys the heck out of me is our big screen TV, because we'll be watching a movie or a TV show, and right at the part where we're going to find out what's really been going on here, there'll be this pop-up in the middle of the screen. The Smart Hub has finished its update. do you want to start it now? And that is so annoying. Again, it's something that people seem to have been gotten used to. But you need to look back and realize there was a time when your appliances worked for you and not the other way around. And we need to get back to that, because all of this tinkering and patching and update and upgrade and everything takes time away from more productive pursuits. We're spending more time working on our computers than getting work out of the computers that we can use to earn a living with.
Right. Well, you're talking about the smart hub on your smart television, so-called smart, I say.
Yes.
On your television, and they, when they're constantly, as soon as you hook the television, the phone, the cable box, the Wii, the PlayStation, whatever it happens to be, a new PlayStation rather. Whenever you hook one of those things up, I think they use a Wi-Fi. They hook if you have Wi-Fi at all, they automatically access your Wi-Fi, and so they're automatically hooked to the internet somehow. And you don't know what to do about that. Otherwise, they don't work, supposedly.
Well, yeah, but in our case, we have to have the Smart Hub because we have that Amazon Prime subscription so that we can watch Grand Tour. Nothing automatically hooks to Wi-Fi in our home because of the way our security is set up. We have to specifically allow any Wi-Fi device to access our router. We actually have two routers. We have a guest router that hits the outside net but doesn't go inside our firewall, and then we have our main Wi-Fi, which is really very much locked down. So we have to have that on. But why do they need to pop that up in the middle of a show? And like I said, we need to get back to a mindset where our products work for us and not the other way around. Got to let you go here, Tim. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're going to go to another phone call. Janet in Kansas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello.
You're on the air.
I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Yes, hello. I wanted to ask you a couple questions. Number one, about Syria. Towards the end of the day, were caught in a cauldron, and they were being annihilated. And,
Janet, you're going to have to go back and start that sentence again because we had a momentary interruption where you dropped out, and I lost you until cauldron. So could you start that over again?
All right. Towards the end of the battle in Aleppo, the number of those rebels affiliated, some of them with the CIA, trained and supplied and funded by the CIA, some of them by other Western entities, who knows, that they were in a cauldron and being annihilated and were fighting amongst themselves. And they were not given, Russia had already told them, if you harm any of our people with a colonel and a whomever, it's over.
Janet, I'm sorry, your phone keeps, Janet, listen to me, your phone keeps cutting on out, so what I'm going to do is ask you to hang up and try and call back in because there's something going on where we keep losing you, okay?
Okay, I will do that. Bye.
All right, bye-bye. All right, let's switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you.
Aloha.
Something warmer.
I'm sorry. What's going on?
Well, when you were talking about the electronic toys and how they're behaving, and when you're watching a show on the I call it the boob tube for that matter.
Yeah, but it doesn't have a tube anymore, so,
Well, I just realized that it's basically playing psychological warfare with you. And that being that right at the crescendo of a show where you're actually right there at that moment of a steak being dangled in front of your nose and you're about to take a bite of it with whatever's going on to the climax of the show. And all of a sudden this thing pops up that says this is ready to go for you. It's like being dangled a steak in front of your nose to bite on. and all of a sudden you end up getting hit with a chicken nugget instead.
Well, it's an interesting theory, but, I mean, the pop-up just seems to happen at random times, but it's very annoying.
Does it
matter? They should have it do it at first power-up of the TV before you get into a show. But there's just this general thing where, again, you're having to work more and more to keep whatever products you're buying going. And outside of my office here and outside of our big screen TV, my personal lifestyle, I'm pushing it in low tech. I don't have the big computerized coffee maker anymore. I've got just a manual press, and, I'm getting rid of all of that stuff. It really is kind of crazy. Francis, we're going to have to let you go. We got to do a station break, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to take a phone call from Tom in hang on a second, Minnesota. I get these abbreviations confused. Anyway, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I would kind of like to. Do you know offhand the natural blaze, is that associated with Glenn Beck or not?
I have to be very honest. I don't know. I know Glenn Beck's got a lot of operations out there, and we do need to start paying attention to a lot of these websites with that revelation that there's that company in California that sets up and runs websites whose job it is to plant junk on the Internet, so the corporate media can say, oh, look at all that junk on the Internet. How could you possibly trust anything they have to say? So we do need to be very, very concerned about who's out there, and especially those that are putting out viral hoaxes just to be funny. Or again, for disinformation. There are a lot of websites that are already well known as being completely untrustworthy, and people, after a while, they begin to develop a sense of what's working and what isn't working.
Yeah, I think, there's real situations out there like Fukushima and that mine, the pollution that the snow geese just died in, supposedly, but the Natural Blaze reports that, and one thing about Natural Blaze and E&E News that talks about Fukushima, and they talk about these massive die-offs of the birds or the sea life or something, there's never a picture. They're talking about all the beach is littered, or this pit is littered with things. It's like, why isn't there one picture?
Yeah, I'm looking at their page right now, and I'm seeing pictures that are very, very generic and not actually of the story itself. I've only linked to them a few times, stories that are sourced in other areas as well, usually about vaccines and GMO.
Yeah. I think if people just realize, just go one step further and think when people see this news, because I remember the first time I heard John F. Kennedy talking to the press club, I think was where he kind of attacked the New World Order. I thought, is that somebody's voice or is it really his? So you know what I did? I went to his presidential library, found the speech at his presidential library online, and there it was. So I had it verified. So when people go, oh, that's not him saying those things, it's like, yes, it is. I found out from his presidential library with a transcript. That's exactly what he said.
Well, there's an old saying that history is a joke played by the victors on the vanquished in front of an audience that dares not laugh. And from time to time, what we find out is that there's a lot of myth-making going on while people are alive. Certainly, the allegations against Donald Trump are a good example. But some people feel a responsibility to correct the record further down the road when those who are the guilty parties have all lived to ripe old ages and passed on. We understand that there's still a bunch of material about the John F. Kennedy assassination, which will be made public somewhere down the road. And that tells us that there's still more to the story to be found there. I've seen Kennedy misquoted an awful lot. I've seen a lot of people misquoted, and you'll come out with quotes from people, and I get the same reaction. Oh, they never said that about bankers. They never said that about immigrants. And then you go back and you document it, and the people whose livelihoods depend on this myth making, they don't care. If you expose one of their hoaxes and frauds, they'll just be back with another one tomorrow.
Well, that's what I say. When I found it in his presidential library, I had my absolute proof. How can you argue that he didn't say it when it's in his library?
Well, they'll quit arguing that he didn't say it, and then they'll just come on back and come out with something else. You need to understand the paid propagandists and shills, all these people working for public relations firms and everything, they are very much like that Monty Python sketch, The Argument Clinic, where all they're really out there to do is to gainsay whatever you're saying. Oh, that didn't happen. Oh, this is ridiculous. Oh, you're being a fool. And that's basically how they earn their money. And I guess it beats working in a fast food restaurant, but only barely.
I'd like to point out to people listening that I noticed, like, Keith Olbermann had his day when he was attacking Bush, and Glenn Beck had his day on Fox when he was attacking Obama, and they're both basically insignificant now. But Michael Rivero, whose only agenda is the truth, keeps on ticking, so I appreciate you.
Well, I think you're allowing the corporate media to tell you who is significant and who isn't. Now, Glenn Beck's decline appears to be more about the financial mismanagement of his business empire. But some of the people, for example, the guy who does reality check, Ben Swan, was with the corporate media, didn't want to play their games, and they kicked him out, and he's going strong. He's very well respected here on the internet and the independent media. The corporate media won't talk about him, but then again, we all have to decide, we're not going to let the corporate media tell us who is and is not important.
Well, you have the Clinton News Network, and Glenn Beck there was becoming the Ted Cruz Network, I remember, during the election. I think that's what lost him.
That very well may be, because people just understood Ted Cruz was never eligible to be the president, and they were just, Glenn Beck basically started sounding like Hillary's people. We don't care what the laws and the rules are, we want what we want, and that should, be the end of it.
And he kind of made his name like, let's stand behind the Constitution. And it's like, well, what are you doing supporting Cruz? Haven't you read the document?
It's amazing how many people that I run into who talk about, the Constitution, and then you'll quote to them from the Constitution and you get this blank stare. It's like they use the word Constitution, like one of the spells they learned at Hogwarts to silence the other person. Well, the Constitution says this. Be silent, you fool. I have now trumped you. And you'll come back and say, no, that's not what the Constitution says. And you'll come back and they'll just kind of scurry away. It's like this current debate over the Electoral College, where Hillary's people are out there saying, we're going to get the Electoral College to turn on Trump and Hillary will be president. And that's constitutional. Well, the Constitution also says Congress can overrule the Electoral College if the Electoral College has clearly not acted in good faith. And they don't want to hear that. In fact, let me share an insight with you that occurred to me the other day. I've been watching Lee Remini's expose of the Church of Scientology. The second episode has now come on out. And it is a real shock to see the tactics being used by the Church of Scientology, and then realize you're seeing the exact same tactics being used by Hillary's supporters. And you come to realize the same psychology is behind it, because Hillary has been running her entire campaign as a personality cult. Everybody worships the Empress Hillary. And Scientology, basically its adherents, or suckers, whatever you want to describe them, they walk around with this absolute assumption of superiority to everybody around them, coupled with this idea that whatever they're doing is for the betterment of the entire earth, and therefore anything they do is fully justified and explainable in terms of we are helping the earth become better. And you see that very much in that liberal philosophy. We're here to make the world better. We're going to erase borders. We're going to let men use the women's restroom, and this is all going to make the world much, much better. And, so there's a lot of similarities here. And some of the worst tyrants in history have run their supporters as personality cults. Adolf Hitler did it. Mussolini did it. Hillary was doing it. Jim Jones was doing it. L. Ron Hubbard was doing it. And then you peek beneath the surface and you realize just how dangerous this kind of psychology can be.
And that's kind of what we were talking about, even though you just point out the Constitution and people just kind of ignore the facts, but yet you look at all this crazy stuff people are willing to believe. I just wonder what it is sometimes about the human psyche, where they'll believe, some guy put on magic glasses or,
yeah. Well,
a UFO came down, or
well, I used to play with that a lot. I paid my way through college as a professional magician, and so I understand how that can work. But my audiences, when I was a magician, knew that what I was doing was a deception, and that was kind of the fun and entertainment. The only exception to that was for 6 months I tried doing a mentalist act, and I attracted a following of people who frankly scared the stuffing out of me. They really believed I could do these things that I was doing. And that, if I had absolutely zero moral sense, I probably would have been another L. Ron Hubbard, because they believed I could foretell the future, and they believed that I could see the unseen. And it was just kind of amazing, kind of like what Uri Geller was doing with his spoons and whatnot. Anyway, listen, Tom, I'm going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network. I'm sorry it's a little bit late, but Tom and I were having an interesting phone call. Story just now breaking. President Obama has ordered a waiver on restrictions for military aid for foreign forces and others in Syria, deeming it essential to the national security interests of the U.S. to bypass provisions in the 4-decade-old Arms Export Control Act. There are laws that say the U.S. cannot just send weapons hither and yon across the globe, and Obama has basically said those rules don't apply for Syria. So it is very obvious that the U.S. is in fact planning some kind of a stunt to try and turn the tables inside Syria, and by doing so, of course, they are risking full-on conflict with Russia. And that is very, very, very dangerous indeed. This nation is not ready for a major war against an equivalent power. We don't have the money. We don't have the manpower. Even with all the foreign refugees and illegal immigrants who are not going to be effective fighters because they don't have an emotional bond to the United States. We don't have the manufacturing to sustain the supply of military supplies which vanish like water through your fingers in a war zone. And we don't have the moral authority, going on back to Sun Tzu and the art of war. Our weapons are hideously expensive to buy. They don't work very well. And our children approaching military age have all been turned into these weak, easily offended, shocked, needed safe space pansies by the liberal school establishment. We don't have what we need to be fighting a major war against Russia or China, and these maniacs are still going forward with that. All right, let's talk a little bit about the economy. Yet another fraud has surfaced in the banking centers. Deutsche Bank is providing smoking gun proof of massive rigging and fraud in the silver market. And this goes all the way back to April, when Deutsche Bank had agreed to settle allegations it rigged the silver market, and they settled for $38 million, which none of the people who got cheated ever saw, and it just went from Deutsche Bank to the government. And apparently the other members of the manipulation cartel have turned on each other, and Deutsche Bank is now providing evidence against the other banks and financial institutions that were involved in rigging silver prices. Now, as you know, Wells Fargo is dealing with the aftermath of these 2 million fraudulent cases where Wells Fargo employees were opening fake accounts in their customers' names. And the accounts existed solely to charge them fees, which in some cases made the customers overdrawn, which resulted in more fees, overdraft fees. And in some cases, the customer's credit report got a black mark, which can have serious repercussions. It can cost you a job. It cost you a loan. Even your house if you can't refinance the mortgage. Huge amounts of destruction. Wells Fargo is now trying to convince the judges that all of these accounts that were fraudulently opened included the standard Wells Fargo arbitration agreements, where if you are signing up for a Wells Fargo account, you're required to sign this agreement saying that you will give up your right to sue the company and you will be forced to have your case heard by an arbitrator paid for by Wells Fargo. Gee, think they're going to be objective and unbiased? And Wells Fargo is trying to convince the judges in this case that even those arbitration agreements were forged by Wells Fargo's employees, that they still should be legally binding, that all these customers who were harmed by all of this activity shouldn't be allowed to sue Wells Fargo, but instead submit to Wells Fargo arbitration. I mean, talk about fascism fully on display here. Because fascism is what you get when corporate power and the government are aligned together against the general population. And the last word is that apparently the judges are saying, well, you know, there's a valid argument here. We can't let these people who got cheated by Wells Fargo sue Wells Fargo out of existence. That would be wrong. No, it would be right. It would return the law of evolution to our financial centers. We need to let financial institutions that commit crimes or just make bad business decisions go out of business and make way for new institutions under wiser, more prudent management. That's how progress is made. Other countries are jailing their crooked bankers. Some countries are actually executing crooked bankers. We need some of that here. Instead, in the United States, every time a banker commits a fraud or a crime and it goes bust, what does the government do? They take trillions of dollars from the American people and give it to the banks so the banks can then loan that money back to the American people at interest. Does that make any sense at all to anybody other than a banker? Now, getting into the Christmas shopping season, a lot of people are looking at Sears, and Sears has been in trouble along with the other major retail chains. And part of it is simply that, again, the American people don't have any money to spend, even for Christmas. And apparently 2 of Sears' top executives have now resigned their positions this week, which is accelerating speculation that Sears is about to file for bankruptcy. This is from Business Insider. And I think the speculation is that unless Sears has an absolute runaway successful holiday shopping season, that they will be gone next year. Another iconic American business falls victim to the economic mismanagement of this country of the last 30 years. And what do we get from the government? Oh, the economy's fine. We only have a 4.6% unemployment rate. And look at the stock market. They're all doing great. If you're hungry and starving and lost your job and your business and don't have any money, it's got to be your own fault. And really, you shouldn't criticize the government. At which point we come back with Teddy Roosevelt's admonition that criticizing the government is the natural right of all Americans and their duty. Now, down in Texas, they're beginning to feel the pinch down there as people have less and less disposable income. And it's not just the oil bust from that ridiculous, poorly thought-out oil price war with Russia. Sales tax collections in November, pardon me, got a frog in my throat. Sales tax collections in November fell 2.7%. compared to a year ago, and are down almost 6% year to date. The Texas people don't have money to go to the store and buy things. The system is collapsing from the bottom because the bottom has been looted to make the top richer. Now, any economy, there has to be some kind of a mechanism where the wealth that is being siphoned to the top of that pyramid gets recycled back down to the bottom as decent wages and salaries so people can trade their labor for decent wages and salaries and then pump that money back into the economy to keep it going. That's what you have under capitalism. Under fascism, that recycling mechanism is taken away. So the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and eventually it locks up because the flow of money through the economy stops. And that's where we are right now. one of the more alarming things we need to consider right now is the total amount of debt in the world is 3 times the global gross domestic product, which means it can't ever be paid off. And it means every bit of property is somehow or other pledged as collateral to the holders of those debt. Somewhere, somehow, someplace. It's going to have to be written off. Why not do it now? We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, India, as you know, up until recently, has been one of the top consumers of gold, both for investment and for ornamentation. We've all seen the photos where you're going through these various marketplaces in India, and there are all these stalls that are just filled with gold chains and bracelets, and they do love their gold. And there were some disturbing rumors that the government of India was going to start confiscating gold as part of their effort to ban all cash. They've already ended circulation of high-denomination notes, all supposedly because of the black market and drugs and terror. And as I pointed out many times here before, any attempt to ban cash will also have to have a ban on gold, like Roosevelt did back in 1933, and even silver, because this scam to force us to be dependent on the banks to do all of our commerce for us only works if there is no portable store of value and wealth available to us. And I expressed my concern that if these rumors about India starting to ban gold prove true, it would shock the world gold market. So it is with a little bit of concern that I'm looking at this story that came out of Zero Hedge about how India is now, in fact, targeting gold, and they started raiding houses of some of their wealthier people, no questions asked, confiscating jewelry. And I can't imagine the Indian people are going to be very, very happy about that. And this has already led to speculation in other places like goldcore.com that buying silver is going to replace gold as the preferred money of India. But once India gets the gold, they will ban the silver. And all of this is being sold to the public that we have to shut down the black market. We have to shut down the drug trade and organ trade, and it's all being done with cash, and cash is bad. Now, the name black market was chosen to create a negative connotation. It's the black market. And the media always likes to put out these stories about drug smuggling, organ trafficking, children trafficking, bought and sold, all for that evil, filthy cash. But technically, the black market is any transaction that occurs outside government monitoring and bank profiteering. If you sell your old computer on Craigslist and are paid in cash, leaving no record, technically that is also the black market. Now, the goal here is not to curb all these illicit trades, especially in drugs, when you have so many in government that profit from drugs, but to force ordinary citizens into dependence on the banks to handle their commerce for them. And once that is in place, the banks will charge whatever they think they can get away with for handling your transactions, and government will tax every transaction. And once you're forced to keep your money in a bank savings account and not at home, then they can continue with this ridiculous idea of negative interest rates to just help themselves to your wealth whenever they see fit. So this is a very, very alarming trend. Now, over in Great Britain, there was a little bit of an oopsie, and it turned out their trade deficit had been underestimated by £6 billion. And it turned out where they made the mistake was after the Brexit vote, when they were figuring out what their trade deficit was as a standalone nation, they failed to take into account the huge importation of gold coins and bars by British subjects as wealth preservation. And once they added that in there, it dinged their trade deficit by £6 billion. But it's a very smart thing to be getting metals in small amounts, so records aren't being kept, and keep it under your own control, because right now the laws are in place in this country. In the event of a crisis, the banks can not only dip into your savings account, they can go into your safety deposit boxes. The banks are not a safe place for your money anymore. And our advice continues to be, you should have only in the bank what you need to cover your immediate obligations, and you should have the rest under your own control at home, some of it in cash, some of it in gold and silver coins, buried in the mayonnaise jar out back by the pineapple plantation. That's our advice. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'm looking at this story that just came out on Breitbart. Obama urges soldiers to question Trump's authority and criticize our president. And apparently in his final address to America's armed forces, Obama reminded troops that once Donald J. Trump becomes president, soldiers have a duty to question his authority. Funny how Obama never said soldiers had a duty to question Obama's authority or criticize him. Oh, no, it's you will obey me and you will disobey him. I mean, I think that comes dangerously close to subversion and even sedition. And then Obama went on to say that terrorism is caused by the Second Amendment and human-caused global warming. This is your president on drugs. I mean, that is just so absurd. So absurd. All righty, getting on back here to the economic news. I'm not the only person that is, and by the way, if you're having trouble getting to my website, the Tantrum Squad is back. You know, Hillary's people are trying to jam my server again, and we're just going to have to smile indulgently as they roll around on the floor and pound their fists and kick their feet and cry because the world isn't being what they want it to. I'm not the only person who's out there pointing out the ridiculousness of the latest jobs report. Paul Craig Roberts is out there basically saying this is just more USDA choice bovine excrement from the corporate media and not from Russian propaganda websites. Basically saying that, yeah, they're coming up with a 4.6 unemployment rate by ignoring people who've been out of work so long they've quit looking for work because the jobs just are not there. And the vast majority of the job gains that they got in that report for November are seasonal hires for retail that are going to be let go come January, or as soon as the January sales are over. The fact is November only produced 9,000 full-time jobs in a nation with a population of 330 million. It's not really significant. And that's another classic case of the government lying to you. Our real jobless rate is already way beyond the jobless rate of the 1930s Depression. So, now, apparently the CEO of U.S. Steel is now saying he's going to bring back 10,000 jobs from outside the country to this country. Bring steel making back here to the United States. So Donald Trump is already keeping his promise. He's creating jobs. Carrier, U.S. Steel, Ford, plus all the people being paid to protest Trump in front of Trump Tower and all those people who are being paid for all these recounts. Wow, look at all. He's not even the president yet. Look at the employment he's creating. Now, there's an article over in Electronic Intifada, interestingly enough, about the New York blacklist and its McCarthyism. And basically what it is Governor Andrew Cuomo signed an executive order calling for the state to cut financial ties with institutions that boycott Israel. Well, Mr. Cuomo, your job is not Israel. Your job is the state of New York. And you are clearly not doing your job by doing this, especially if those companies that you're cutting off from state business reside in New York themselves. You're causing financial harm to the economy you're responsible for in order to please a foreign government. But these tactics smack of McCarthyism. And I already had somebody write into me and say thanks to Andrew Cuomo, he now has a list of the businesses he's going to be doing all their Christmas shopping at. All right, let's take a phone call. John in Barbados, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yes, I'm getting pretty fed up with all this nonsense coming out of the corporate media. You know, the lie machine's just gone up another gear, in fact. It's too ridiculous to laugh at.
Well, they're operating just like the government. If at first you don't succeed, lie again.
Well, the only good news I can see is that now the Syrian government is in almost full control. They've now taken back 85% of that rebel-held area. And in fact, the rebels are squeezed now into a couple of city blocks. So they must be pretty desperate.
I imagine they are. I mean, it's all over, but the shouting is really what's going. Which is why Obama apparently has signed or ordered a waiver for the Arms Control Act in order to be able to get more weapons in to their pet terrorists.
Well, I mean, I think it's too late anyway, because already now I'm hearing that because this enclave is so small now, they can release up to 20,000 Syrian troops to focus elsewhere. Because they've only got to defend against this small number of people that's left in this couple of city blocks.
Well, that means they can go on down south and start to do something about all those missiles Israel's firing in from the Golan.
Absolutely. Well, they can, you know, I mean, it frees up, as I say, up to about 20,000 troops. Once they've completed this Aleppo thing, and that, what I'm being told is that between 25 and 45,000 troops will be released, and they're going to go east towards Raqqa. So we're looking at a rout, really, of the attack ferries. But none of this is being reported, and unless you actually look for it, you can't find any.
No, you have to hunt it down. I mean, Fox News has finally stopped talking about John Glenn. Actually, no, I take it back. Now they've got Donald Trump commenting on the passing of John Glenn. And it's like there's nothing else going on in the corporate media world right now except John Glenn, you know, how bad Trump is, how great Hillary is, and how evil the independent media is. And that's basically it.
Well, I think this Jill Stein effort for all these recounts is now beginning to backfire, because it's actually highlighting all the Democratic election fraud.
Yes, it is, and what's coming out of Michigan is all the fraud benefited Hillary Clinton, and you're not seeing that on any of the national TV news networks either.
No, of course not. But I mean, I'm going to the election commission's sites to see what's actually happening, what the reality is.
Well, the Michigan authorities are saying that even though the recount itself is now stopped, they are launching an investigation into the election fraud which took place in their state, and that could really blow up in Hillary and the Democrat space.
Well, I'm really sick and tired of these libtards, these pathetic children that keep crying. Trump won.
Yes.
He won it fair and square, despite all the Hillary election fraud and voter fraud.
Well, that's what's made them so angry. They were absolutely convinced that they were going to steal that election. They had already broken out the champagne in Hillary's campaign headquarters before the final results came in. They were getting tanked up. They were absolutely convinced they had stolen this election. But it was just like the Brexit. Election fraud cannot overcome a landslide. And I think if there were a full investigation across the country and an auditing, we'd find out that Trump really had a huge landslide. It wasn't neck and neck. And if you look at, all the counties that Trump won, Hillary's entire so-called popular vote victory is concentrated in California, which is full of illegal immigrants and refugees, and in all the sanctuary cities. That's where she got all these huge numbers of votes. And what's coming out of Michigan is that it was just an absolute widespread epidemic, and nobody wants to talk about it. You know, it was kind of a weird thing that we saw leading up to the election itself, where the corporate media and the government are trying to say that, you know, Russia's going to hack our elections, and yet responded to every report about election fraud domestically by saying, oh, it could never happen. It could never happen. If there's any fraud or mistakes, it couldn't change the final outcome. And what the scale of what they're finding at Michigan is saying, yes, the election fraud was designed to change the outcome of an election. And all these ballot boxes in Michigan where they had more ballots than they were supposed to, the ballots were for Hillary. The ballot boxes where they didn't have as many ballots as the paperwork said, those boxes had come from areas that were heavily Trump. It was just a frightening epidemic of election fraud, and it was all across the country.
Well, I think the major cities, I think Detroit, Michigan, was a prime example where, the actual record of votes cast and placed in a ballot box didn't match the numbers that were actually found when they did the recount in that ballot box.
Detroit was, half the precincts in Detroit were invalid for the recount because the number of ballots in the ballot boxes didn't match the paperwork for that ballot box. And whoever was in there playing with the ballots apparently had replacement seals, because it looked like the seals were intact. And it may not have even been that, because if you go back and you look at the documentary Hacking Democracy, Bev Harris demonstrated in one place where whoever ordered the seals for the ballot boxes chose a glue that you could peel off. And that, of course, completely negates what a seal is supposed to be about. Once it's sealed, you can't open the box without damaging the seal and revealing that the box has been opened. But Bev Harris went into one of these boxes with a seal on it, and she picked up the edge of the seal, and she just peeled it right back and opened the box. And then she put the seal back over, smoothed it over, and there was no trace that the ballot box had ever been opened.
Well, this whole election in America has been a travesty of democracy. It's not democracy at all. It's who's got the biggest voting fraud system.
Third world dictatorship propped up by a lie that our votes actually matter. But if Hillary's attempt to steal the White House crumbles and Trump isn't assassinated, we're going to have 2 years where everybody in America is going to have to stand up and say, look, we had Florida 2000, we had this absolutely humiliating and embarrassing disaster in 2016. It's time to overhaul the election system from top to bottom, to have national standards, to mandate voter ID, to have, the little bottles of blue to dip your finger in so that you don't vote more than one time. And I've already laid out a very simple system for counting the election that bypasses tabulation centers and electronic voting machines, and guarantees that you can track the results of your precinct all the way up to the national election and verify for yourself that the votes are tallied accurately. And if we could get this system in there, hang on a second before you get there. The system I have outlined, and I've been posting it on my website and all over social media, the system I've outlined basically turns every single voting American into an elections inspector to validate the counts and the math work is correct. And there may be ways to still cheat, but our current system is designed to facilitate and conceal cheating, and we need a system that makes it as hard as possible for the cheating to occur.
Yeah, my final point would be Mr. Trump and his cabinet with these anti-Iran, 3 anti-Iran generals. I'm very worried about that, Michael, because I don't think Mr. Trump is being honest with us about his Iran policy.
Well, he's had a lot of harsh words for Iran, and I'm hoping some of his other advisors are going to point out the very simple fact that Iran has not launched a war of aggression against another country in over 200 years, and certainly not since the Iranian Revolution of 1979. The real reason the U.S. wants to go into Iran, it's to punish them for breaking free from U.S. puppet rule under the Shah, to make sure their oil is forever linked to the U.S. dollar, to impose a private central bank on them because they're one of the few nations on earth that have a public bank and public currency managed as a public utility. And finally, of course, Israel's interest to break it into pieces and balkanize it into smaller nations that are easier for Israel to push around and bully.
Well, I think the way the Chinese and Russians are cozying up, if you like, with Iran, that's a trio of nations which are pretty well advanced in their military tech, and Iran's got its own quite large and sophisticated military technology in place already, and they're speeding up the production of their ballistic missile systems.
Well, and again, when you stack that up against America's weapons, and by the way, I'm still waiting to see the result. Congress demanded a fly-off, a dogfight between the F-35 and the A-10 ground attack aircraft. I'm waiting to see the results of that. America's military-industrial complex is producing very expensive junk. And you know what decides the outcome of a war? The first country that runs out of money loses. That's really what it's all about. And when you have cost-effective weapons, you're going to stay in the fight a lot longer. When you have hideously expensive weapons that are really not very good, you're the nation that's going to run out of money first, and you are going to lose.
Well, on top of that, Michael, of course, how long does it take to manufacture, say, an F-22 or F-35? And I would suggest that you just couldn't keep up with the losses.
That's true, that because they are so complex, they take a long time to assemble. You need to go back and remember the model of the Liberty ships during World War II. These were cargo ships that were literally built to use once or twice and get sunk. And they could build them fast. They could build these ships faster than the Germans could sink them. And that's how they were able to keep up the supply of material going to Europe during World War II. We don't have that thinking. Everybody wants the weapons to be as expensive as possible because they're bid under a cost-plus contract. The more expensive the end product is, the more profit is made by the defense contractors, and it's gotten us into this mess here. And again, when you're dealing with children who are coming of military age, who have been brainwashed into being these fragile, delicate, easily shocked and traumatized individuals, they're not going to do very well in combat at all.
Well, I'm thinking of, an F-35, $100 and somebody million dollars each, and a $50,000 missile takes it out. It just doesn't make sense.
No, it really doesn't. And, Russia's always gone the other way. The MiGs may not have been as capable, but they were inexpensive, and they could produce them by the thousands as compared to hundreds of the equivalent American jets. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, John. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and talking about immigration and everything else that's going on out there. Over in Austria, apparently Austrians were gathering at a Christmas celebration, and apparently migrants from Afghan were offended by the celebration, and apparently took their belts out of their pants, used them as whips to attack the Austrians. This, I think, is part of that cultural enrichment we were all told that the migrant refugees were going to bring to our lives, to be flogged. Now, over in Germany, Katie Hopkins is out there castigating Angela Merkel, saying that you can ban the burqa, but what are you going to do about banning the migrant boats encouraged to come? The people of Germany have just absolutely had it up to here with all the problems caused by these refugees. And the banning of the burqa and the forbidding of the media to mention when crimes are being committed by the refugees is not going over very well for the German people. And this is all part of that globalist New World Order nonsense of dropping the borders and blending everybody together, and with the firm liberal belief that we're all just going to clasp hands and stand around the campfire and sing Kumbaya and give each other big, wet, sloppy kisses, and it doesn't work that way. Human nature remains human nature. It is a liberal myth that human nature can be changed by changing the environment around it. And it all goes back to that Margaret Mead book, Coming of Age in Samoa, which is the Bible of the liberal philosophical establishment. And it's a fraud. It's a hoax. It's been discredited time and time and time again. Now, over in France, Marine Le Pen is out there saying that if she wins the presidential election, there'll be no schooling for illegal migrants. And Trump should do exactly the same thing here. Trump does not actually need a wall along Mexico's border. All he needs to do is cut off the free stuff. All he needs to do is remind everybody that it is a felony to harbor an illegal immigrant in this country. You can go to jail for 10 years. Let's start enforcing that law. And let's start with all those mayors of all those sanctuary cities who are out there saying, I'm not going to go along with Donald Trump. I'm a believer in the New World Order, and we're going to flood the United States with all these other people, no matter what damage it causes, because I believe in the cult of Hillary and George Soros, and we're making the planet better, and anything we do is therefore justified. It really is. It's turned into a cult. I mean, beyond just Hillary and the Democrats, liberalism has become a cult. They operate just like one. You should tune in to that Lee Remini series about Scientology and just hear what the Scientologists did to those who did not agree with them, and you will recognize the exact same pattern of behavior by the liberals against those who are not caught up in their little religious fantasies. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Pope Francis, along with saying that media that puts out bad information and smears politicians, they're all sinners and they're going to go to the dark regions, is also out with something that's a little bit more somber. And he's basically saying it's time to face up to the fact that we are in the Third World War. And sadly, I agree with him, but I guess now that the Pope has said it, it's official. We're in World War III here. We're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Steve in Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello. Thank you very much. We had some concerns here recently about some of the cabinet picks, and in particular, Mnuchin with his background of Goldman Sachs, and kind of wondering about some of the other ones, but this one in particular, I was wondering if you had any comments about that. I don't know. We'd heard of that, and I'd have to check this. I wish I knew more about it, but that the founders actually warned against the wrong person being appointed Secretary of the Treasury, someone with who actually came from a investment or banking background.
Yeah, there were founders. There were founders who said that. Believe it or not, in the early nation, there was actually a law saying lawyers could not be in the Congress, and of course they got rid of that one real quick.
Yeah, yeah, but I was wondering, is there?
Well, let me put it to you this way. Having a banker in charge of the Treasury is like having a drug addict in charge of your local pharmacy. You're not going to get a good result.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah, we... do you think that these people who represent I could say the dark side, are they surrounding Trump and trying to move in and get their...
well, they've been doing
ideas.
that. Yeah, they've been doing that ever since Trump won the election. And Chris Christie was trying to help them, which is why Christie got demoted and Christie's original suggestions thrown out. But Donald Trump, unfortunately, because of the realities of the campaign, he does owe a lot of favors to some of his top backers, and I'm sure that his top backers had made deals saying, I will give you all this money for your campaign as long as I get to pick who you're going to nominate for this or that official. In any event, it's going to be a bit of a circus because we're already hearing that the Democrats in the incoming Congress have already pledged they're going to delay confirmations as much as they can and just run interference and block Trump at every possible opportunity to jam up his administration so it can't do anything in those first 100 days.
Yeah. It sounds, I guess we shouldn't be surprised about that attitude on
No, but we should
part.
be disgusted because, these people are so caught up in their own wealth and power and authority and ego, they're forgetting the job they're actually supposed to be there for. And I would have really been very happy if more of those old incumbents had been given the heave-ho like John McCain, but I think it would be foolish for us to presume that all of this massive election fraud that is now surfacing in the recount states was confined only to the presidential election.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about the, they say, was it said that it's the wealthiest cabinet in the picked, and then some of these retired generals, does that bode well, do you think, for future ideas as far as going to war?
You're looking at, General Matisse, as I mentioned earlier in the show, strikes me as being very Eisenhower in his thinking. He understands combat is bad. It should be avoided whenever possible, but when it can't be avoided, war should be conducted as efficiently and economically and straightforwardly as possible to minimize casualties and costs. So that's a good mindset to have as Secretary of Defense. It's certainly quite the contrary to Ash Carter and his predecessors, who were very much tied in with the military-industrial complex. But in terms of the wealth issue, you need to take into account the effects of inflation. Because as the money declines in value, people who are making money will make more of it numerically. Doesn't mean they have more buying power, but the numbers look bigger on paper. And you could probably say this incoming Congress is the richest Congress in U.S. history, and it may or may not be all that significant. Unfortunately, our Congress is overpopulated with millionaires, and we don't really have enough ordinary people in the Congress. Especially in the House of Representatives, that's supposed to be a cross-section of the American people, not just a training ground for rich lawyers getting ready to mount their first campaign for the Senate.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could just mention something about about this other issue. I'd heard that originally the idea for the Congress, I'm assuming both houses, was to just meet, once or twice a year and take care of certain business and then go back home. Is that accurate?
That's very, very accurate. When the Founding Fathers set up the United States of America, and before I finish this answer, let's take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. When the United States began, the states had all the power and authority over their own territory, and the central federal government was limited to arbitrating between the states. And Congress, because their role was very limited, only met a couple of times a year because everybody who was in the government had day jobs. There was no permanent full-time ruling body whatsoever, except perhaps for the president himself. But everybody else, they had day jobs. They had businesses to take care of. Serving in the Congress was an honor that was part-time. And over the time, unfortunately, it's become this permanent ruling body over all of us. But you're absolutely right. Originally, Congress was just supposed to meet a couple of times a year because their power and authority was limited to resolving disputes between the states who had the real authority. Now, the makeup of Congress, the House and the Senate, is derived from the British Parliament, the House of Commons, and the House of Nobles. And it's meant to strike a balance between the wealthy, the landowners, and the ordinary people. And the same thing is true here in the United States. The senators represent the wealth and power, or originally represented the wealth and power of the states. Originally, the senators were appointed by the states to represent the states' interests in Congress. And unfortunately, I think it was the 16th Amendment that turned the senators into an elected office elected by the people, and this was part of the hamstringing and weakening of the state governments to bring them subordinate to the federal government. But originally, the senators were appointed by the state governments to represent the state's interest, and that's why there's only two per state. Primary senator, senior senator, and a backup just in case. The House of Representatives, of course, is apportioned on population to represent the ordinary common people so that a balance was struck between these various competing needs and issues.
I was wondering, do you think that if somehow that could ever be gone back to something like that, would that help the states to exert more authority, say, over these cities that are rebelling, the sanctuary cities, I'm thinking of in particular.
Absolutely.
Like that.
Absolutely. On the original model of the United States of America, Arizona would not have been questioned about saying, we're going to enforce our border, our southern border with Mexico. It's up to us. It's our state. I think if we were to go back to the original model of the senators being appointed by the state governments, the fact of the matter is Washington, D.C. needs to be dragged back to its original constitution limits. The people who are there now obviously don't want that to happen. Power is addicting as much as money is. But we've definitely gone way too far in the direction of a strong central government. And again, I see a lot of parallels between what the U.S. is going through right now and what the Soviet Union was going through immediately preceding its collapse, including this nonsensical war between the corporate media and the independent media.
Wow. Okay. Well, I appreciate your comments, and I had a couple, as I say, questions. I was trying to mention those to see if those were accurate things that I'd heard.
Well, I think the founding fathers, if they got in a time machine and came and saw what the U.S. has grown into, they would be appalled, especially Thomas Jefferson. Yeah, I believe it. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Perhaps there's some hope that we could, if enough people got together, we could get it back somehow, at least somewhat to the way it's maybe supposed to be. That's what we're trying to do here. But the first thing we have to do is get an honest election system to regain the people's control over this government. Because without an honest election system, we're going to be ruled by whoever's got the most money to hire the most cheats. And Trump's ability to generate a landslide that overcame the election fraud is a once-in-a-lifetime event. We're never going to see that happen again in our lifetime. Thanks an awful lot, Steve. We're going to let you go. Switch over to Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha, Bob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. We've been discussing the Electoral College and all these, there haven't been many, but some of these Electoral College voters saying they're going to vote for another candidate, a third candidate, or for possibly Hillary. It's sort of making, like, all this Electoral College business, it's sort of making the popular vote option look better. Because if we can't depend on these Electoral College voters to vote how the people voted, then maybe we should just go to a popular vote, if that's the case. Well, I'm sick and tired of hearing these Electoral College people saying, "Oh, they're going to vote, they're going to vote, their conscience."
Well, the Electoral College was created for two reasons. First and foremost, to try and guarantee equal influence of all the individual states. And this was all done at a time before we saw such a huge population disparity appear in states like California, Texas, Pennsylvania, and Florida. The other reason was a little more pragmatic, and it was considered a final safeguard against the rise of a populist demagogue who the people were just taken in by, the way most people were taken in by Hillary, but represented really a danger to the nation and indeed the world. And so the Electoral College was that final check. And then, of course, the provision for Congress to overrule the Electoral College is a final check on that as well. Again, the problem with a popular vote is that it will result in all campaigning taking place only in those most populous states where the people in the less popular states are ignored. Now, instead of having electors, we could simply have a point system where we'll say that Michigan has 16 points, and the points are awarded to whoever wins that state. And then you just tally up the points, and that basically is your president right there.
I support the Electoral College system, but it just seems like with these, I don't know, maybe it it's just happening with a guy with a candidate like Trump. It's just you can't depend on these people to vote, to vote the way the people voted. And it seems, I don't know, but I just want to see Hillary Clinton. I don't want to see her face again. I'm tired. We thought we had seen the last of her in 2000, and she became a senator of New York. We thought we'd seen the last of her after she lost to Obama, and she became Secretary of State. I'm just sick and tired of the woman. She won't go away. Her and her slimy husband. Even this foundation. Who knows if the money they made from this foundation is being used to bribe these electoral college voters?
It
Who
could
knows?
very well be. I mean, George Soros already indicated he was going to try and financially influence the electoral college. I mean, it's completely, hopelessly corrupt. And I'm in agreement with you. I don't want to see Hillary Clinton ever again, except, of course, for my Hillary Clinton toilet brush. I do enjoy looking at that.
Yeah, right.
Okay. But, no, seriously, the issue is that all of the checks and balances that were initially built into the system have now all been taken down. And I think nothing illustrates that more clearly than this campaign during this entire year by Hillary's people and the Democrats to go from state to state to state to overturn the voter ID laws on this ridiculous excuse that somehow requiring people to show a legitimate ID and prove their citizenship and residence is somehow racist. And no, it isn't, because black people have driver's licenses, Hispanics have driver's licenses. The only people who don't have ID are people who are not legally allowed to vote in this election. And when we look at the scale of the illegal vote in this country, obviously voter IDs laws need to come back, and they're being brought back. But what we need to get rid of is the level of politicians who are so powerful and influential and corrupt that they can simply change the laws to whatever they want them to be to carry out the campaign they want. Hillary Clinton was depending on those illegal immigrants. That's why they attacked all the voter ID laws. And there were way too many liberal judges who just went along with a wink and a nod saying, yeah, okay, well, if letting the illegals vote is the only way we can keep our grip on power, then we're cool with that. Remember what James C. Fox said in Sullivan versus United States? About how judges routinely will go along with things that are actually illegal, but they just say, well, it's okay. We've been doing it this way for a while, so, who really cares if, this or that amendment didn't actually get ratified? We're just going to go on pretending like it was. He actually admitted that in a court document. No,
I mean, it's becoming a third world country, as Paul Craig Roberts said.
Becoming?
I believe it already has. I believe it already has. I travel a lot. And I'm glad you mentioned that story about United and the overhead compartment. If they do that, I will never fly United again. Period.
Absolutely.
But I've spoken to my friends. I have a good friend in Costa Rica, and I told her about this voter ID and how some states say, people say it's a suppressing of the vote. She couldn't believe it. She was shocked. She said, wow, because she's actually looking to move to the U.S., and I kept telling her, you're crazy, stay in Costa Rica. But, Mike, I go to Russia a lot, too, and I know you were brave enough to wear that Hillary for Prison shirt in Hawaii. I'm going to pick up quite a few Vladimir Putin T-shirts. If I send you one, will you wear it in Hawaii?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In a way, I'm kind of...
And Claire.
And she'll wear it, too. In a way, I'm kind of sorry the Washington Post has now come on out and admitted that story that we're a Russian propaganda outlet may have been fake here, because I was hoping to get a Russian passport out of it, the way Paul Craig Roberts is trying to do, but darn it now, that's not going to happen. Okay.
Well, I'm going to pick up quite a few T-shirts for my friends here, and I'll send you and Claire each a T-shirt, so you guys can wear it in Hawaii and piss off those liberals out there.
I love it. Thank you very much for that, Bob.
Right,
we're going to let you go and switch over to Carrie in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Tell that guy to give me a Putin T-shirt too.
I've already hung up on him. Sorry about that. You can probably buy them online, I'm sure.
Probably. But I just wanted to say something about Trump's cabinet. The guy before him talked about the Secretary of Treasury, and I'm behind that comment. But really, what really blew my mind is that John Bolton is going to be considered to be Secretary of State. The ultimate neocon useful goal.
Oh, boy. I got to be very honest. I'm not happy with some of Donald Trump's nominees. I understand he's repaying favors of his major financial supporters for the campaign. But again, I maintain Donald Trump at his worst is still a heck of a lot better than Hillary Clinton at her best.
Well, maybe, he didn't want to appoint John Bolton in the beginning. He just threw him in there just for a little, chaff to satisfy some people, and he's not going to pick him.
Well, I think that was also behind the Mitt Romney thing, where he went to dinner with Mitt Romney, and everybody's saying, oh, Romney beat this and that, and Trump's obviously moving away from him and from Rudy Giuliani, and it could very well be that, Trump is denying this, of course, but it may be that Trump was just kind of teasing Romney with the possibility and then dumped him, for Romney's refusing to support him during the campaign. So who knows what's going on? I'm still disappointed I wasn't appointed head of NASA, because I had a plan, that was absolutely going to bring back our high-tech civilian incubator, along with making the ground crews dress up like apes for all the returning astronauts. So, Gary, we're going to let you go.
The music.
Yeah, we got to let you go.
Bye.
Commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take another phone call from Dorothy in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Dorothy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. I have a quick question. Thank you for taking my call, and I can take the answer off the phone, off the air, on the air. What is the main idea behind Scientology?
That's kind of a great question there. I mean, Scientology is sold to the initiates and novices coming off the street as a system of mental self-improvement, and it uses a lot of pop psychology tools like the E-meter, which is a stress measuring device, that actually can help people confront some of their trauma. But once people are drawn into Scientology, you're charged more and more money for these things. I think a session with the E-meter is $800. And courts around the world have ruled repeatedly that it is a for-profit corporation. Here in the United States, there was a very prolonged battle with the IRS, and the Church of Scientology succeeded in getting tax-exempt status. But it really is a religion, and for the longest time, only the people at the very top were allowed the innermost secrets of Scientology, which turned out to be this yarn that L. Ron Hubbard created. Because remember, before he started the church, he was a science fiction writer. In fact, he started Scientology as a bet with another science fiction writer, Robert Heinlein, that he could just invent a religion out of thin air and get rich, and obviously Heinlein lost. But the story at the heart of Scientology was leaked out by some of the people who've had enough of this thing. And the story is there used to be this galactic overlord called Xenu, who makes the evil emperor of Star Wars look like a really nice guy that you would have over for a game of cribbage. And he basically condemned a whole bunch of these Thetans to death here on Earth. He brought them to Earth and dumped them into volcanoes, and because boiling lava wasn't enough, he dropped nuclear bombs on them as well. And the spirits of the Thetans are now wandering the planet, adhering to the minds of human beings. And as long as you have a Thetan in you, you're going to have suffering and pain and trauma. And what Scientology offers to sell you for a small fee is that they will get the Thetans out of your body. That's basically it in a nutshell.
May I ask, because you referenced Scientology with liberalism, what is the connection?
Well, the connection wasn't the belief system, but the methodology and the behavior of a cult organization system. I mean, obviously, if you look at Jim Jones and what happened down at Jonestown, he wasn't talking about Xenu, but the mass manipulation and the psychology of the followers is basically the same. The belief that you are automatically superior to everybody around you because you are part of the cult. The belief that anything that you do is making the earth a better place, and therefore anything you might do is fully justified, even if it includes harassing people, threatening people, beating them up, breaking into the FBI and stealing documents critical of Scientology, that kind of a thing. So the parallel between basically it's how cults have always operated throughout history in terms of the mindset imposed on the cult's adherents, whether it was the Nazis' belief in the master race, Scientologists' belief that they are automatically superior to non-Scientologists, liberals' belief that they are superior, at least intellectually, to everybody else around them. It's a common mechanism, regardless of what that core belief mythology may be, and that's going to change from cult to cult to cult. The operation remains the same.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, speaking of Vladimir Putin, soon to appear on a T-shirt near you, he's basically out there saying that following the defeat of Italy's Prime Minister Renzi and this referendum to consolidate power and take more money away from the Italian people and give it to the banks, is basically saying this is the signal the New World Order has lost its grip on Europe. And that certainly does seem to be what's going on between the Brexit, the Italy referendum, Marine Le Pen talking about a Frexit, a Drexit. All of these countries are getting ready to bail. We just need to get the New World Order out of our government, and peace and harmony will come to the galaxy. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before the commercial break, we were talking about how Vladimir Putin is saying that Renzi's defeat in Italy signals that the New World Order is losing its grip on Europe. That's a good thing. We need to get the New World Order out of our government because they're operating on a failed premise. This idea that they can blur the whole world together and everybody's going to be perfectly okay with that. And we can see all over Europe and here in the U.S., that doesn't work that way. Bill Gates has another point of view, of course. He says humanity badly needs a one-world government that will force you all to use Windows 10 and Windows 11, and it's going to tackle climate change. Talk about liberals living in a fantasy world. They really, really are. I believe, therefore it must be true. Oh, and by the way, all you shills and propagandists out there, stop sending me emails insisting the earth is flat. It's not going to get published on my website or talked about on the show. This latest attempt to try and tarnish the independent media, it's obvious, it's pathetic, is really what it is. Enough of this stuff. Now, Donald Trump's head for the Department of Homeland Security is very much on board with securing our borders. He thinks there should be, absolute draconian immigration requirements and proof that you're supposed to be here. If you're not supposed to be here, you should not be able to avail yourself of social services. And he's saying there's tons of drugs and sex slaves basically just pouring across that border because it's been left deliberately wide open and it's time to shut it down. I still think crocodiles in the Rio Grande are going to be a lot cheaper, but it's not up to me anymore. Now, speaking of human-caused global warming, the big chill is hitting. Chicago just broke a 1940 snowfall record. A virtual wall of snow in North Dakota has shut down 300 miles of an interstate. It is a mess. Football fans are upset because apparently it's going to be snowing on the Raiders-Chiefs game. Another story coming out of snowboarding.com, and this is one of the ski resorts. And they're out there celebrating 6 inches of snow at 5 a.m., and it's been snowing most of the time, and it looks good, and they're getting ready. They're packing the snow down with a snowcat and getting everything ready to open. Not too long ago, in fact, I think it was in 2011, the Real News, in this case the New York Times, actually ran a story about how ski resorts were all going to be driven out of business because of human-caused global warming. This was in the New York Times, the Real News, by their own admission. The Northwest is bracing for the polar plunge, they're calling it. They're looking for any kind of a name they can use to make it look like we should ignore this in the wider claim of global warming. Humans are warming the planet. All the snow and ice, it's the polar vortex, it's the polar plunge. It's an anomaly. Pay no attention to all that snow and ice here. Just believe, as St. Al of the Gore will tell you to believe. Latest word is man-bear pig has been found frozen to death. But they are looking literally at temperatures 10s, 20s degree below what is normal for this time of year. It's actually unusually cool here in Hawaii. It's getting down to the mid-60s at night. And as you know, we've got record amounts of snow on the tops of the volcanoes on the Big Island. But this has not stopped the CBC, the Canadian Broadcorpian Castration, from declaring that all this snow and ice it's ultimately caused by human-caused global warming. Let me actually read you a couple of lines from the story. With cold, blustering snowstorms battering the west coast and the prairies, you might be tempted to say, what global warming? But climate change may in fact be to blame for this oh-so-Canadian winter. So they're out there still pushing this idea that human-caused global warming causes cold, hard winters. That's really it. I mean, that's how desperate they are. Remember all the other things they've said in the past? Oh, the world is warming, but the heat is hiding at the bottom of the ocean. Really? Ever hear of convection? Now, one more time for those who understand science and understand the corporate media is full of it. The primary dominant control on climate here on Earth is the sun, that giant pulsating ball of fusing hydrogen up there in the sky. The sun is not constant. The amount of energy it produces varies over time. We all grew up in science class learning about the 11-year sunspot cycle and the 22-year magnetic cycle. And scientists have begun to realize there are other cycles ranging from 60 to over 120 years as well. It's a little hard to figure those out because it's only been possible to scientifically study the sun for 100 years. So longer period fluctuations haven't come around to be recognized as a fluctuation. Now, every once in a while, the low end of those cycles line up and the sun will really cool down, taking the planets, including Earth, with it. Now, the last time this happened was during the Maunder Minimum from 1645 to 1715, which produced the Little Ice Age. Now, Al Gore's money-making hysteria aside, and he's made almost $100 million off of this nonsense, solar output is currently in decline. And astronomers who are not on Al Gore's payroll are estimating we're at the start of a new Maunder Minimum as these low points in the solar cycles align again, and it's going to last at least 30 years. And I hope you're all paying attention because there will be a pop quiz next class. Now, speaking of human-caused global warming, if you looked at the videos coming out of the Dakota Access Pipeline, you can see they're under a massive, massive blizzard there. And now, apparently, shelters are being set up in Morton County and the snow removed from the highways to make sure those Dakota Access Pipeline protesters are not freezing to death, which would be bad press for everybody. And the protesters are staying there because the company building the pipeline is openly defying the federal government and saying, we don't care what you say, we don't care if you say we don't have permission, we're going to go here. And that's it. Now, by the way, a listener wrote in to correct me. It's the 17th Amendment that broke the U.S. Senate by making those popularly elected positions rather than designated by the state governments. It's the 17th, not the 16th. You've seen one amendment, you've seen them all. They all look alike. It's parchment. Little clarification on the Pope's comments about the media spreading false stories and smearing people. Apparently this comment was made in the larger context of the Pope still trying to deal with the Church's clerical child sexual abuse scandal. So apparently his specific complaint was that the media shouldn't be spreading stories about sex scandals. Even if they're true, it's a sin and you're going to go burn in the dark places. That's the context on that one. The Washington Post story where they're saying that all of us independent media are all Russian stooges. has now gone global. I'm looking at a copy that's over in the Daily Mail. It's a huge black eye for the Washington Post, which they deserve. They did it to themselves. They went to a website whose ownership is deliberately concealed, took a list that was assembled apparently just on the basis of whoever linked to a Russia Today story, and ran it as a story with no verification behind it at all. Violated every basic fundamental principle of good journalism. But then, of course, that's what the corporate media is designed to do. Speaking of which, we have a caller on the line. Ed in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. I like to call them the disconnected media. They're just completely disconnected with what Americans need and want.
Well, they were never really connected once the big media corporations started being put together. Their connection is with their corporate owners and their government infiltrators. There was a former president of CBS News who came on out and said, our job is to give people what we think they should have, not what they want. And that was a declaration right there. They're here to tell you what to believe, what to think, what to care about, what not to care about. A good example of that, of course, is Israel and Palestine. Oh, always we feel so bad for what's going on in Israel. Palestinians, not worth caring about. Same thing with the Dakota Access Pipeline. When that original pipeline route went near a mostly whites town, it was a big crisis, and now that it's going through Indian lands, come on, guys, let the pipeline have its right of way. I mean, that's what media does, is tell you what you should be worried about and not what you should not care about at all.
But most of the people that have the time to watch a lot of those shows, like The View and Fox and Friends and a lot of the morning news, is they're not working. I mean, a lot of if you've got the time to spend watching that kind of mind-bending thing that they've got going on, and then they're just completely disconnected with the whole situation.
No. They're not disconnected. They're exploiting it. They're pandering, to their audience. Their audience doesn't want to think it's their own fault where they are. Nobody's going to say it's Wall Street and the federal government the reason that we're all struggling in poverty. So they're going to say it's the patriarchy. You get that from The View. Back in the 1990s, during the heyday of Oprah Winfrey and these other hosts that were always out there at the forefront of the feminist thing, their show was being watched by women at home who were ironing, and feeling very frustrated with life, and they pandered to that because that's what builds viewership numbers and advertising revenues. They're not interested in what's good for you. They're interested in whatever maximizes the profits to their TV show. The View, panders to frustrated women in this age and gives them a target to blame. Oh, it's the evil male patriarch, it's Donald Trump, it's all this and it's all that. Anybody who doesn't toe that line gets kicked off the show.
Right. It's amazing. It just is. Well, that's all I have for tonight.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. And, that's kind of an interesting story. Now then, over in Great Britain, they have started having the same problem happen that we're seeing in the U.S., where a company will come on in and they will acquire the exclusive marketing rights to a medication and then crank the price up by an insane, obscene amount to gouge those patients who need the medication or their insurance companies and providers. And over in Great Britain, Pfizer and Flynn Pharmaceutical have been fined by the government for hiking up the price of epinephrine by 2,600%. And what it was is they took the drug and they gave it a new name and a new ad campaign, and they put it out on the market with this huge price increase. And a lot of people buying it thought they were getting a new, improved drug that justified the price increase, and they didn't. It's all about the money. And you need to recognize the mindset of the ruling elite. We Ordinary people just exist to generate profit for them however possible. Going back to yesterday, we were talking about carrageenan in dairy products. Has zero nutritional value. It's added as a thickener to make it look like whatever you're buying from the dairy company it hasn't been watered down. And it's a serious bowel irritant. It's even been linked to cancer. And the FDA lets them go on selling it. And if you are using products with carrageenan and you get, for example, one of the things it can cause is ulcerative colitis, and you go to the doctor, what's the doctor going to do? Tell you to stop using carrageenan? No, they're going to sell you a pill, a tonic, suppositories, whatever. It's all about maximizing profit. And the utter disdain and lack of respect by these corporate executives and money junkies toward ordinary people is staggering. The entire medical industrial complex business model requires us to be constantly chronically ill. And by the way, U.S. life expectancy is now in decline. It had climbed a little bit since 1993. It was in decline back in 1993, before 1993. It was climbing. Now it's in decline again. Because health problems in this country are getting worse. Why? Because of toxic food additives and a medical industrial complex that sees treatment as far more profitable than prevention or cures. Nobody wants a cure for anything. If you come in, if I'm a doctor, and I'm not a doctor, but I played one once in a movie, if you come on into my office and I cure you of whatever you've got, you are gone, and I never see you again. The revenue stream stops. If you come into my office and I treat your symptoms and make you feel better, but you still have whatever's wrong with you, you'll be back the next month, and the month after that, and the month after that, and the month after that. The revenue stream is guaranteed. That's the business model. Remember that one doctor got sent to prison for 40 years because he was telling perfectly healthy people they had cancer. So he could sell them radiation and chemotherapy treatments, and he was billing Medicare for a lot of this. That's why they finally caught up with him. It's all about the money. And I want to reiterate something because I get all this email from people saying, oh, you just hate rich people because you're jealous and you're not one of them. I have no objection to people who want to be rich. It's how they do it. People like George Lucas, Steve Jobs, James Cameron, they got very, very wealthy by producing something, movies, entertainments, computers, that we wanted. And we trade them our money for what they have created, and they became rich, and that is how it's supposed to work. That's capitalism. And we rightly respect and honor people like that, and we should hold them up as an example to our children. My problem is with all these crooks who have bribed the governmental system and corrupted the banking industry so that wealth just automatically flows from our pockets to theirs, for which they return nothing of any substantive value to society. That's what I have a problem with. Got to take a break here. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. And just taking a quick look at the recount circus. Wisconsin is 70% done. No significant change to the results. It's still Donald Trump. Michigan, of course, their recount stopped by a federal judge. That may happen to Pennsylvania tomorrow. Florida is solidly Donald Trump. Over 100,000 voters. The vote's already certified by the state. Remember what that judge in San Diego said? Yes, there was fraud, but once the state certifies it, there is no remedy. And they can cite that as a precedent. Interesting little wrinkle that maybe Jill Stein and Hillary Clinton didn't realize. Apparently under state law in Pennsylvania, and possibly also Florida, I'm not sure about that, but in Pennsylvania can still send their electors to the Electoral College even if the recount is not finished. So this thing is definitely falling apart. They may not be over yet because apparently the Secretary of State of Georgia, Brian Kemp, is very upset. There was apparently an attempt to hack into the Georgia voter registration database, and they caught the hacker's IP, and it tracks back to the Department of Homeland Security. And so Kemp is now asking, why is the Department of Homeland Security now attempting to hack our voter election database? Are they planning on demanding a recount there and fiddling with things? Now remember, before the election, the Department of Homeland Security offered help to the states to secure their election systems prior to the election, but the Wall Street Journal pointed out Georgia was one of the states that was specifically denied assistance. So we're looking at massive election fraud from within the government itself, the Department of Homeland Security. Talk about being at war with the establishment. Okay, real quick before we run out of time on the show. Remember that Samsung Galaxy Note 7, the ones that started exploding, and then Samsung put out a software patch that prevented the phone from recharging fully, which was a patch, and ultimately Samsung recalled the Galaxy Note 7 phone. And a lot of people have sent the phones in for replacement or refund. If you have not, you must do so now, because Samsung, starting next week, is going to be sending out electronic messages to all the Galaxy Note 7 phones in the U.S. that will permanently brick them, turn them off, disable them. They won't do anything at all. That will be it. So they want everybody to get those very dangerous exploding phones back into Samsung as quickly as they can. Now, one of the corporate media attacks against the independent media is going to an independent media website. You're risking malware because the criminals hang out on our websites, and yes, they do, and we try and be vigilant and stop them. But it's not really a problem confined to the independent media because apparently there was a 2-year-long, highly sophisticated malvertising campaign that hit some of the most popular corporate news sites in Great Britain, Australia, and Canada, including Channel 9, Sky News, and the Microsoft Network. Oddly enough, the United States was ignored by the malware. Maybe it was the NSA. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, with the lovely Lady Claire. So have a good evening. Stay warm, stay safe, stay skeptical, stay informed. Aloha, America.